In a luxury hospital, a billionaire struggles to save his son, who is in a coma from an unknown cause. While renowned doctors fail, a highly perceptive young woman, the daughter of a cleaner, begins to notice strange patterns during a relative's visits. Using knowledge she inherited from her grandfather, she discovers that the young man is being poisoned. If this beautiful story of overcoming adversity and love has interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Continuing. St. Raphael's Hospital was known throughout the United States as the most luxurious and expensive in the country. Located in the heart of New York City, its Italian marble walls and silent corridors housed the most important patients of the national elite. It was here that politicians, famous artists and billionaire entrepreneurs sought treatment when they needed the most advanced in modern medicine. Each room looked more like a five-star hotel suite than a hospital environment, with panoramic views of the city and services that cost more than many people earned in an entire year. On that Tuesday morning, the activity in the hospital was as intense as ever. Impeccably dressed nurses moved through the corridors with silent steps, renowned doctors checked electronic charts on state-of-the-art tablets, and the soft scent of French lavender hung in the air, masking any smell that might remind one that this place dealt with illness and suffering. It was a world apart, where money had the power to buy not only comfort, but also hope. On the 12th floor, in one of the hospital's most expensive suites, lay 22-year-old Gabriel Montgomery, the only son of the powerful businessman Edward Montgomery. Gabriel was a young man who had everything in life, a brilliant mind, natural charm, and was the heir to a business empire valued at billions of dollars. But 3 weeks ago, something inexplicable had happened. Gabriel had collapsed during a family dinner and had since remained in a deep coma, with no doctor able to explain the cause of his condition. Edward Montgomery was a man accustomed to solving problems. At 58, he had built his empire from scratch, transforming a small transport company into one of the country's largest corporations. He knew how to negotiate, how to apply pressure, how to get what he wanted. But here, before the bed where his son lay motionless, all his influence and wealth seemed useless. For the first time in his life, Edward felt completely powerless. The best doctors in the country had been called. Famous neurologists, international specialists, and equipment costing millions of dollars were brought in specifically to examine Gabriel. MRIs, CT scans, sophisticated blood tests, everything was done multiple times. The results always came back normal or inconclusive. It was as if Gabriel's body had simply decided to stop responding, with no plausible medical explanation. Dr. Henry Armstrong, head of the medical team, responsible for the case, was considered one of the best neurologists in North America. A graduate of Harvard University, with specializations in France and Germany, he had treated complex cases throughout his 30-year career. But Gabriel Montgomery was becoming a mystery that defied all his knowledge. In his private conversations with Edward, the doctor could not hide his growing frustration. Meanwhile, on the lower floors of the hospital, a completely different reality unfolded. Mary Miller had been working as a cleaning assistant at St. Raphael's for 12 years. She was a 45-year-old single mother who had raised her daughter with great sacrifice and love. Every day she arrived at the hospital at 5 in the morning and worked until 3 in the afternoon, cleaning rooms, corridors, and bathrooms with the same care and dedication she would give her own home. Mary's daughter, named Sophia, was 17 and was a special young woman. Not because she had any disability, but because she possessed a sharp intellect and a perception of things that impressed everyone who knew her. Sophia had taught herself to read at the age of 4 by leafing through books she found in the hospital's recycling bins. She could memorize entire conversations after hearing them just once and had an insatiable curiosity about the world around her. Despite their financial difficulties, Mary always made sure Sophia continued her studies, even if it meant working extra hours to pay for public school costs. Sophia spent almost every afternoon at the hospital, waiting for her mother to finish her shift. She had become a familiar presence among the staff, always polite, always quiet, always with a book in her hands. The doctors and nurses were used to seeing her sitting on the corridor benches, reading intently, without bothering anyone. She knew every corner of that place, every routine, every person who worked there. What no one knew was that Sophia carried a special treasure with her, an old notebook that had belonged to her maternal grandfather, Jacob Sanders. Jacob had been a soldier during World War II and later worked as a medic in field hospitals. During his years of service, he had written down everything he learned about medicinal plants, natural poisons, and the effects of different substances on the human body. His observations were precise and detailed, the result of real experiences in extreme situations. When Sophia was little, before Jacob died, he used to tell her stories about his adventures and teach her about nature. He would say that nature had the power to heal, but also to destroy, and that an intelligent person should learn to recognize the signs it gave. Sophia held these lessons in her heart and studied her grandfather's notebook as if it were a sacred text. On that Tuesday, while waiting for her mother, Sophia was sitting in her usual spot on the 7th floor, near the elevators, when she noticed an unusual movement. She saw Edward Montgomery exiting the elevator accompanied by a younger, well-dressed man carrying a small cooler bag. Sophia immediately recognized the billionaire, as she had seen him several times during his visits to his son. But the man with him was new to her. Edward looked tired and worried, very different from the confident image he usually projected in newspapers and magazines. His expensive clothes couldn't hide the weight he carried on his shoulders. The man beside him spoke in a low tone, gesturing gently, as if trying to reassure the businessman. Sophia watched as they headed to the 12th floor where Gabriel's suite was located. Later that same day, Sophia saw the same man coming down from the 12th floor alone. He seemed satisfied, unlike Edward, who had stayed upstairs. The cooler bag he carried was now empty, and Sophia noticed a faint smell in the air as he passed her. It was a sweetish aroma, but with something strange mixed in, something she couldn't quite identify. This observation sparked Sophia's natural curiosity. During the years she had frequented the hospital, she had learned to recognize patterns and routines. Doctors always arrived and left at specific times, families visited during set periods, and each person had their particular habits. But this man was different. There was something about his behavior that didn't fit the normal pattern of family visits she was used to observing. That night at home, Sophia leafed through her grandfather Jacob's notebook, looking for something that could explain the strange smell she had sensed. The yellowed pages contained detailed drawings of plants, descriptions of symptoms, and notes on different types of poisoning. Jacob had been very meticulous in his records, always noting not only the effects of substances, but also the characteristic odors they produced. It was then that Sophia found a note that caught her attention. Her grandfather had described the smell of certain poisonous plants as sweet, but with a disguised bitterness, like burnt almonds mixed with honey. The description perfectly matched what she had smelled that afternoon. According to Jacob's notes, this type of aroma was characteristic of a few specific types of toxins that could be administered in small doses, causing symptoms that could easily be mistaken for natural diseases. Sophia felt a chill run down her spine. Could her suspicions be correct? Was someone deliberately harming the businessman's son? The idea seemed too absurd to be true. After all, who would dare to poison someone inside a hospital, surrounded by the best doctors in the country? And why would someone do that to Gabriel, who, from everything Sophia had heard, was a young man well liked by everyone who knew him? But her grandfather Jacob's lessons echoed in her mind. Sophia, my girl, the truth isn't always obvious. Sometimes the answers are right in front of us, but we can't see them because we don't want to believe what we see. An intelligent person observes, notes, compares, and only then draws conclusions. Never be afraid to question what seems normal, because what's normal sometimes hides great secrets. The next day, Sophia decided to pay closer attention to the movements in the hospital. She arrived earlier with her mother and stayed alert to everything happening around her. Around 2 in the afternoon, she saw the mysterious man arriving again with his cooler bag. This time, Sophia decided to follow him discreetly, keeping enough distance not to be noticed. The man went straight up to the 12th floor and entered Gabriel's suite. Sophia managed to position herself in the hallway in a way that she could observe the activity without being seen. About 15 minutes later, he left the room and headed for the elevator. The bag was empty again, and the same sweetish aroma hung in the air as he passed. But this time, Sophia noticed something else. The man had a discreet smile on his face, a kind of satisfaction that seemed inappropriate for someone who had just visited a relative in a coma. Sophia ran to the 12th floor and managed to have a quick word with Carla, one of the nurses caring for Gabriel. Carla had known Sophia for years and was always kind to her. "Hi, Sophia. Good to see you here. Is your mum doing okay?" "She's fine, Aunt Carla. Can I ask you a question? That man who just left Gabriel's room, who is he?" "Oh, you mean Robert? He's Edward's brother, Gabriel's uncle. He comes here every day to bring a special tea that he says will help the boy recover. It's a family recipe, something their grandmother used to make." "Poor man. He's very worried about his nephew." Sophia thanked her for the information, but a strange feeling washed over her. If Robert was Gabriel's uncle and was so worried, why did he have that look of satisfaction when he left the room? And why did that tea have a smell that exactly matched the descriptions of toxic plants in her grandfather's notebook? That afternoon, at home, Sophia studied Jacob's notes even more intensely. She found several references to slow poisoning, where small doses of toxins were administered regularly, causing symptoms that progressed gradually until leading to a coma. The method was especially dangerous because the symptoms could easily be confused with degenerative diseases or natural neurological problems. Sophia knew she was reaching a frightening conclusion, but she also knew she needed more evidence before she could do anything. After all, she was just a 17-year-old girl, the daughter of a cleaner, with no formal medical training. Who would believe her if she accused a member of the Montgomery family of trying to poison Gabriel? She needed to be very careful and very smart in her next steps, but one thing Sophia was sure of: she couldn't simply ignore what she was seeing. If her suspicions were correct, Gabriel was in real danger, and she might be the only person who had noticed. The responsibility she felt was enormous, but her grandfather Jacob's lessons had taught her that doing the right thing wasn't always easy, but it was always necessary. As night fell over New York, Sophia made a decision that would change her life forever. She would find out the truth about what was happening to Gabriel Montgomery, even if it meant confronting people far more powerful than she had ever imagined. The next morning, Sophia woke up with her grandfather Jacob's notebook on her mind. She had spent much of the night rereading the notes on poisonous plants, and now she was almost certain she knew what was happening to Gabriel. But she still needed concrete proof. While having breakfast with her mother, she tried to act natural, but Mary Miller noticed that something was different about her daughter. "Sophia, are you okay? You seem worried about something." "I'm fine, Mom. Just thinking about my school exams that are coming up." Mary smiled, proud of her daughter's dedication to her studies. She could never have imagined that Sophia was actually planning an investigation that could put them both in a very dangerous situation. At the hospital, Sophia adopted a new strategy. Instead of just observing from a distance, she decided she needed to get closer to the situation. She knew the hospital's routine well, and knew that at 2 in the afternoon, during the nurse's shift change, there was always more movement in the corridors, which would make it easier for her to move around the 12th floor without attracting attention. When Robert arrived that day, punctually at 2:30 in the afternoon, Sophia was already strategically positioned. She had asked Carla, the family's friendly nurse, if she could help with some simple tasks, and Carla, always kind, had agreed. Sophia now had a perfect excuse to be on the floor where Gabriel was hospitalized. Robert Montgomery was about 50 years old, with well-groomed grey hair and an elegant appearance that inspired confidence. He always wore expensive suits and spoke in a calm, reassuring voice. He was the type of person anyone would consider trustworthy at first sight, but Sophia had learned from her grandfather that appearances could be very deceptive. This time, when Robert entered Gabriel's suite, Sophia managed to get closer. She was organizing medications on a cart near the door and could overhear part of the conversation he had with Edward. "Edward, I've brought Grandma's tea again. You know how she always said this recipe had special healing properties. I'm sure it will help our Gabriel." "I know, Robert. I thank you every day for being by my side during this difficult time. I don't know what I would do without your support." "We're family, Edward. We'll always be together no matter what." There was something in Robert's tone that sounded strange to Sophia. It was as if behind the words of support there was another hidden meaning. She continued to pretend to organize the medications, paying attention to every word. "Did Dr. Armstrong say anything new about Gabriel's condition?" Robert asked. "Nothing. They still don't understand what's causing this. It's as if his body has simply given up. The tests show nothing abnormal, but he's not getting better. On the contrary, it seems he gets a little worse each day." "Ah, these things are very complex, Edward. Medicine can't explain everything yet, but we have to keep the faith. I'll prepare the tea for him." Sophia saw as Robert opened his cooler bag and took out a small, elegant thermos. The aroma that spread through the corridor when he unscrewed the lid was exactly the same as she had smelled in the previous days. This time, however, Sophia was closer and could better identify the nuances of the scent. It was indeed sweet, almost floral, but there was a bitter note at the end that reminded her exactly of the description her grandfather had made about certain toxic plants. Robert entered the room, and Sophia heard him speak affectionately to Gabriel, as if his nephew could hear him. "Gabriel, my boy, I brought Grandma's special tea for you. She always said this recipe could cure anything. Let's see if we can help you come back to us." Sophia felt a tightness in her chest. If her suspicions were correct, Robert was literally poisoning Gabriel while talking about healing him. The cruelty of the situation was hard to comprehend. After a few minutes, Robert left the room and said goodbye to Edward. As he passed Sophia, she again smelled the characteristic aroma, but this time she noticed something else. On Robert's hands, there was a faint residue of a dark substance, almost imperceptible, as if he had handled some kind of concentrated extract or essence. That afternoon, Sophia made a bold decision. She knew she needed a sample of that tea to confirm her suspicions, but how could she get it without raising suspicion? The answer came when she observed the hospital's cleaning routine. She knew that her mother always cleaned the suites on the 12th floor in the late afternoon, after the visits were over. Sophia waited until the time her mother was working in Gabriel's suite. She made up an excuse to go up to the floor and find Mary. "Mom, I came to help you finish up faster today. I have a school project to do at home." "What a helpful girl. All right, you can help me organize things here." While helping her mother clean the room, Sophia discreetly looked for any trace of the tea Robert had brought. She found a small cup in the suite's bathroom, apparently forgotten there. At the bottom of the cup, there was a small, dark residue of the liquid. Sophia waited for a moment when her mother was distracted and quickly scraped a small amount of the residue with a plastic spoon, placing it in a small envelope she had brought with her. That night at home, Sophia carefully analyzed the small sample she had collected. Using the techniques her grandfather had described in the notebook, she performed some simple tests. Jacob had taught her that certain poisonous plants changed color when exposed to different common substances, like vinegar or baking soda. When Sophia dripped a drop of vinegar on the sample, it changed color, turning a greenish hue. When she added baking soda, the color changed again, this time to a purplish tone. These color changes corresponded exactly to what her grandfather had described as characteristics of the plant known as foxglove, digitalis, one of the most poisonous plants in existence. According to Jacob's notes, foxglove contained cardiac glycosides that, when administered in small repeated doses, could cause progressive cardiac arrhythmias, neurological problems, and eventually lead to a coma. The most frightening part was that the symptoms could easily be mistaken for various neurological diseases, especially if the person didn't know they were being poisoned. Sophia felt a shiver as she realized her most terrible suspicions were being confirmed. Gabriel wasn't sick. He was being systematically poisoned by his own uncle. But the most difficult question remained: why would Robert do this? The answer to that question came a few days later when Sophia overheard a conversation between two nurses in the hospital cafeteria. "Did you know that if anything happens to Gabriel, Edward's brother inherits everything?" one of them said. "Really? But Edward is still young. He could have other children." "Apparently not. I heard the social worker mention that Edward had an illness when he was young that left him sterile. Gabriel is his adopted son, but Edward never told anyone outside the family. And by law, if Gabriel dies, the closest relative to Edward, which is his brother, inherits everything. Wow, what a complicated situation. Just imagine, billions of dollars at stake. Sophia felt as if all the pieces of a terrible puzzle were falling into place. Robert was not just the loving uncle he appeared to be. He was a man willing to kill his own nephew to inherit a fortune. And the scariest part was that he was succeeding in doing it inside a hospital, under the noses of the best doctors in the country, without anyone suspecting a thing. But now Sophia knew the truth. The question was, what could she do with this information? She was a 17-year-old girl with no credibility, up against a powerful and influential man who would believe her. And even if someone did, how could she prove what was happening? Sophia spent the entire night thinking about her options. She could try to talk to Edward directly, but there was a risk that Robert would find out and do something to silence her. She could try to talk to the doctors, but they probably wouldn't take the suspicions of a teenager based on notes from an old notebook seriously. She could go to the police, but without concrete proof, her accusations would be seen as fantasies. It was then that Sophia remembered something her grandfather always used to say, "Sometimes, my girl, the best way to expose the truth is to force the liar to reveal himself." Jacob had told stories about how, during the war, it was sometimes necessary to create situations to make enemies show their true intentions. Sophia had a risky idea, but it might work. If she could prevent Robert from administering the poisoned tea to Gabriel, and if Gabriel started to get better, that would be proof that the tea was causing the problem. But how could she do that without putting herself and her mother in danger? The answer came when she observed Robert's routine more closely. He always arrived at 2:30 in the afternoon, went straight to the 12th floor, stayed with Gabriel for about 15 minutes, and then left. He always left the tea prepared for the nurses to administer during the day. If Sophia could ensure that this tea didn't reach Gabriel, without anyone noticing she had interfered, she could prove her suspicions. The next day, Sophia put her plan into action. She knew that at 3 in the afternoon there was always a bit of a commotion on the 12th floor, as it was the time for the nurses' shift change, and also when some test results arrived. During this confusion, it would be possible to act without being noticed. When Robert arrived and left the tea prepared for Gabriel, Sophia waited for the right moment. At 3 in the afternoon, when the corridor was busy with the shift change, she approached the cart where the tea intended for Gabriel was. With quick and precise movements, she swapped the poisoned tea for a regular tea she had prepared at home, using harmless herbs from the garden her mother kept in their backyard. Sophia knew she was taking a huge risk. If she were discovered, she would be accused of interfering with a patient's treatment, and her mother would probably lose her job. But she also knew she couldn't allow Gabriel to continue being poisoned while she had the power to stop it. In the following days, Sophia anxiously watched for any change in Gabriel's condition. If her suspicions were correct, he should start showing signs of improvement now that he was no longer receiving the toxic substance. And if that happened, she would have the proof she needed to expose Robert. But Sophia also knew that Robert was an intelligent and dangerous man. He would certainly notice if Gabriel started to improve, and that could lead him to take drastic measures. Sophia was playing a very dangerous game, but it was a game she was determined to win, not only to save Gabriel, but to bring justice and stop Robert from continuing with his murderous plans. While awaiting the results of her intervention, Sophia continued to study her grandfather Jacob's notebook, preparing for what she knew would be the most difficult confrontation of her life. She was just a young woman against an empire of power and money, but she had something Robert didn't. The truth was on her side, and she was willing to fight for it until the end. 3 days had passed since Sophia had replaced the poisoned tea, and she could barely concentrate on her normal activities. Every moment at the hospital was a mix of anxiety and hope. She discreetly observed any movement on the 12th floor, any change in the doctor's routines or Edward's behavior, looking for signs that Gabriel was improving. On Thursday morning, Sophia noticed something different. Carla, the family's friendly nurse, seemed more cheerful than usual. During the staff's breakfast, Sophia overheard her commenting to a colleague, "Girl, you won't believe it. Gabriel showed some signs of improvement last night. Nothing too dramatic, but the monitors showed his brain activity increased a little. Dr. Armstrong is cautiously optimistic. Sophia's heart raced. Could her plan be working? She tried to maintain her composure, but inside she was celebrating. If Gabriel was really improving, it would confirm her suspicions about the poisoning. However, Sophia knew that Robert would soon notice Gabriel's improvement, and that could be extremely dangerous. A man capable of poisoning his own nephew would certainly not hesitate to take drastic measures if he realized his plans were being thwarted. That afternoon, when Robert arrived for his daily visit, Sophia positioned herself strategically to observe his reaction. She pretended to be helping a nurse organize charts, but she kept a close watch on his every move. Robert entered Gabriel's suite as usual, but this time he stayed inside for longer. Sophia could hear muffled voices through the door and realized he was talking intensely with Edward. After almost half an hour, he left the room with an expression Sophia had never seen before. It was no longer the confident, calm face of always. Robert looked worried, almost nervous. "Edward told me Gabriel has shown some signs of improvement," Robert said to one of the nurses. "That's wonderful, of course, but he wants us to increase the dose of Grandma's tea. He says if a small amount is helping, a larger amount might speed up the recovery." Sophia felt a chill of terror. Robert was planning to increase the dose of the poison. If she couldn't intercept the tea again, Gabriel could receive a lethal amount of the toxic substance. "Of course, Mr. Montgomery," the nurse replied. "You are so dedicated to Gabriel. He's lucky to have such a caring uncle." If only she knew, Sophia thought. The irony of the situation was almost unbearable. Everyone saw Robert as the loving and dedicated uncle, when in fact he was a potential murderer. When Robert left the hospital that day, Sophia noticed he seemed more agitated than usual. He was talking on the phone in a low voice and constantly looking around, as if he were worried about something. Sophia decided to follow him discreetly to the parking garage to try to overhear some of the phone conversation. "No, not yet," she heard Robert say into the phone. "There's been a small complication. Gabriel is showing improvement, and Edward wants to speed up the treatment. I'll have to adjust the plan. Yes, I know time is running out. The lawyer said Edward is thinking about changing the will if Gabriel fully recovers. Don't worry, I'll handle it." Sophia froze. Robert was conspiring with someone, and from what she had heard, there was a deadline for Gabriel to die before Edward changed his will. The situation was even more serious than she had imagined. That night at home, Sophia tried to organize her thoughts. She knew she had to act quickly, but she also knew she was dealing with dangerous people. Robert's phone call made it clear that he was not acting alone and that there were enormous financial interests at stake. Sophia leafed through her grandfather Jacob's notebook again, looking for some guidance on how to proceed. She found a note her grandfather had made about extreme situations. When someone's life is in danger, it is sometimes necessary to take risks we normally wouldn't. The important thing is to act with intelligence and courage, always seeking truth and justice. On Friday morning, Sophia made a decision that would change everything. She couldn't keep acting alone. She needed to find someone she could trust, who had the authority to investigate her suspicions. But who would that person be? The answer came when she observed Dr. Henry Armstrong talking with Edward in the hospital corridor. The doctor seemed genuinely concerned about Gabriel and frustrated at not being able to explain his condition. If anyone would be interested in discovering the truth about what was happening to his patient, it would be him. Sophia knew that approaching Dr. Armstrong would be extremely risky. She was an unknown teenager, the daughter of a cleaning staff member, trying to convince one of the most respected doctors in the country that a member of the Montgomery family was trying to murder Gabriel. But she also knew she had no choice. During lunch hour, Sophia found Dr. Armstrong alone in his office, reviewing Gabriel's test results. She knocked on the door discreetly and asked to speak with him. "Doctor, my name is Sophia. My mother works here in the cleaning department. I need to talk to you about Gabriel Montgomery." Dr. Armstrong looked up from the results, intrigued. "Yes? How can I help you?" Sophia took a deep breath and began to tell her whole story. She spoke about her observations, about her grandfather Jacob's notebook, about the strange smell of Robert's tea, about the tests she had done with the collected sample, and about how Gabriel had improved when she replaced the poisoned tea. Throughout her narrative, Dr. Armstrong listened to her intently. Sophia expected him to dismiss her as a teenager with a wild imagination, but to her surprise, he listened to her until the end with growing seriousness. "Sophia," he said finally, "what you are telling me is very serious. Are you sure about all this?" "I'm sure, Doctor. I know it seems impossible, but Gabriel is being poisoned, and if we don't do something quickly, his uncle might try to increase the dose of the poison." Dr. Armstrong was silent for a few moments, processing all the information. As an experienced physician, he knew that Gabriel's case had been strange from the beginning. All the tests were normal, yet the patient didn't respond to any treatment, and there had indeed been a small inexplicable improvement in recent days. "Sophia, you said, how you have a sample of this tea?" "I do, Doctor. It's here." Sophia handed him the small envelope with the residue she had collected. Dr. Armstrong examined the material and frowned. "I'm going to have this analyzed immediately. If you're right, this sample could save Gabriel's life and put a murderer in jail. But you need to understand that this could be very dangerous for you and your mother." "I understand, Doctor. But I can't stand by and watch Gabriel die when I know I can help him." Dr. Armstrong looked at Sophia with admiration. It was rare to find someone so young with so much courage and determination. "All right, I'll order the toxicology tests immediately. But while we wait for the results, you need to be very careful. You can't let Robert suspect he's been discovered. What if he brings more tea today? Leave it to me. I'll find a way to intercept any substance he brings without him realizing it. From now on, Gabriel will not receive anything that hasn't been previously analyzed by me." Sophia felt an enormous sense of relief. Finally, there was someone with authority on her side, but she also knew that the most dangerous part was yet to come. When Robert realized his plans were being thwarted, he would certainly react, and there was no telling how far he would be willing to go to protect his interests. That afternoon, when Robert arrived for his daily visit, Dr. Armstrong was waiting for him. Sophia watched from a distance as the doctor approached Robert in the hallway. "Mr. Montgomery, I'd like to talk to you about Gabriel's treatment. As the physician in charge, I need to be aware of all substances he is receiving. Could you show me the composition of this tea you've been bringing?" Sophia saw Robert's expression change instantly. For a fraction of a second, the mask of familial concern dropped, and she could see a flicker of something much more sinister in his eyes. "Of course, Doctor," Robert said, quickly regaining his composure. "It's a very old family recipe. My grandmother always said it had special healing properties." "I understand. Would it be possible for you to provide me with a list of the ingredients? For medical purposes, it's important that I know exactly what Gabriel is ingesting." "Certainly. I'll prepare a list and bring it tomorrow." Sophia noticed that Robert was nervous despite trying to hide it. He knew he was being investigated, and that put him in a very dangerous position. A desperate man could do anything. After Robert left the hospital, Dr. Armstrong sought out Sophia. "He suspects something," the doctor said. "I'm going to rush the toxicology tests on the sample you gave me. If we confirm the presence of poison, we'll go to the police immediately." "Doctor, I heard Robert on the phone yesterday. He was talking to someone about speeding up their plans because Edward is thinking of changing the will. I think Robert might try something drastic." Dr. Armstrong became even more concerned. "I'll increase security around Gabriel. And Sophia, you need to be very careful. If Robert finds out you're the one who reported him, you could be in real danger." That night, Sophia barely slept. She knew she had started a chain of events that she could no longer control. Robert was a powerful man with a lot to lose, and she was just a teenager who had stood in his way. But she also knew she had done the right thing. Gabriel deserved to live, and the truth deserved to be revealed. As she looked at her grandfather Jacob's notebook, Sophia thought of the words he always repeated. "Courage is not the absence of fear, my girl. Courage is doing what is right, even when you are afraid." Sophia was very afraid, but she was determined to keep fighting for the truth no matter the consequences. The next day would be decisive. The results of the toxicology tests would be ready, and depending on what they showed, the lives of many people would change forever. Sophia knew she was about to face the most dangerous moment of this whole situation, but she also knew there was no turning back. She had chosen her side in this battle, and now she needed the courage to see it through to the end. Saturday dawned grey over New York, and Sophia woke with a sense of apprehension that seemed to envelop her entire body. She knew this would be the day everything would be decided. The results of the toxicology tests would be ready, and depending on what they revealed, Robert would be exposed, or she would be seen as a delusional teenager who had concocted an absurd story. At the hospital, the weekend pace was calmer, but Sophia noticed a different tension in the air. Dr. Armstrong had asked her to come in early, saying they needed to talk about something important. When Sophia arrived at his office at 8 in the morning, she found the doctor with a grave expression holding a sealed envelope. "Sophia, the results are in," he said, showing her the envelope. "Before I open this, I need you to understand that this will change everything. If you're right, we're going to face a very serious situation. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Sophia looked at the envelope, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She thought of Gabriel unconscious in the 12th floor suite, being systematically poisoned by someone who should have been protecting him. She thought of her mother, who could lose her job because of her actions. She thought of the risks she was taking, but she also thought of her grandfather Jacob's words about doing the right thing. "I'm sure, Doctor, Gabriel deserves the truth." Dr. Armstrong opened the envelope and read the results in silence. Sophia watched his expression gradually change from caution to shock, and then to outrage. "My God," he murmured. "Sophia, you were absolutely right. The sample contains extremely high concentrations of cardiotoxic digitalis glycosides, specifically from the plant Digitalis purpurea, known as foxglove. Furthermore, traces of other compounds that enhance the toxic effects were found. This combination, administered regularly, would perfectly explain all of Gabriel's symptoms." Sophia felt a mixture of relief and horror. Relief that her suspicions were confirmed, horror at the confirmation that Gabriel was indeed being slowly murdered. "What do we do now, Doctor?" "Now we go to the police immediately, and we'll do one more thing. I'm going to order urgent blood tests for Gabriel to confirm the presence of these toxins in his system. With these 2 tests, we will have irrefutable proof." But before they could continue their conversation, they were interrupted by urgent knocks on the door. Carla, the nurse, entered the office with a pale face. "Dr. Armstrong, you need to come to the 12th floor urgently. Gabriel is in crisis. His vital signs have suddenly plummeted." Sophia and Dr. Armstrong rushed to Gabriel's suite. When they arrived, they found a scene of controlled panic. Edward was at his son's bedside, visibly desperate, while several nurses monitored the equipment showing alarmingly low vital signs. "What happened?" Dr. Armstrong asked. "We don't know," one of the nurses replied. "Gabriel was stable all morning, but about 20 minutes ago he started showing severe arrhythmias and a drop in blood pressure. It's as if he suffered a sudden poisoning." Sophia looked around and noticed something that made her blood run cold. Robert was in the corner of the room with an expression of false concern, but she could see a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. On the table next to the bed was an empty cup. "Robert brought a special tea this morning," Edward said, without taking his eyes off his son. "He said it was an even more potent recipe that could speed up recovery. Gabriel drank it about half an hour ago." Sophia and Dr. Armstrong exchanged a look heavy with meaning. Robert had realized he was being investigated and had decided to drastically accelerate his plans. He had brought a much larger dose of the poison, hoping it would be mistaken for a natural worsening of Gabriel's condition. "We need to perform a gastric lavage immediately," said Dr. Armstrong, "and I'm going to administer the antidote for digitalis poisoning." While the medical team worked frantically to save Gabriel, Sophia watched Robert discreetly. He was nervous but tried to maintain the appearance of a worried uncle. Every so often, he glanced at his watch, as if waiting for something to happen. It was then that Sophia had a dangerous idea, but one that could expose Robert for good. She approached him and said, feigning innocence, "Mr. Montgomery, you seem worried. I'm sure Gabriel will be fine. My mother always says that homemade teas are the best remedies." Robert looked at Sophia as if seeing her for the first time. "Do you work here?" "My mother works in the cleaning department. I always come with her. It's a shame Gabriel is going through this, but at least now the doctors will find out exactly what's causing his problems." Sophia saw Robert's face change imperceptibly. She had planted the seed of doubt. She had made it clear that she knew something would be discovered in the tests. "What do you mean by that?" Robert asked, trying to keep his tone casual. "Oh, Dr. Armstrong ordered special tests on the tea Gabriel drank. He said that with modern equipment, they can find out anything that might be causing problems. It's amazing how much medicine has advanced, isn't it?" Sophia saw the panic growing in Robert's eyes. He was realizing that he had been discovered and that his actions this morning had only provided more evidence against him. At that moment, Dr. Armstrong approached. "Edward, I need to speak with you in private. It's about Gabriel's treatment." The two stepped aside, and Sophia heard the doctor tell him about the suspicions of poisoning and the results of the toxicology tests. Edward initially resisted the idea, finding it impossible that his own brother could do such a thing. But when Dr. Armstrong showed him the test results and explained how they corresponded exactly to Gabriel's symptoms, Edward began to comprehend the terrible truth. Sophia saw Edward return to the room, looking at Robert with a completely different expression. It was no longer a look of gratitude and relief for having family support. It was the look of someone who had just discovered he had been betrayed in the worst possible way. "Robert," Edward said, his voice controlled but filled with emotion, "I need you to tell me exactly what is in this tea you've been bringing for Gabriel." Robert tried to maintain his composure, but Sophia could see he knew he had been caught. "Edward, it's Grandma's recipe, you know that. Why are you asking?" "Because Gabriel is being poisoned, Robert, and Dr. Armstrong has proof that the poison is coming from your tea." The silence that followed was tense and heavy. Sophia saw Robert realize there was no way to deny or disguise it anymore. His mask of a loving brother and devoted uncle finally fell, revealing the ambitious and cruel man he had always been. "You don't understand, Edward," Robert said, abandoning any pretense of innocence. "You don't have any more time. Gabriel isn't even your real son. Why waste the entire empire we built on someone who isn't even our blood?" Edward looked at his brother with horror and revulsion. "Gabriel is my son in every way that matters, and you tried to kill him. I tried to save our family, to save our company. You're too sentimental to see the bigger picture." At that moment, the door opened and two police officers entered the room. Dr. Armstrong had called the police as soon as he received the test results, and they had arrived just in time to hear Robert's confession. "Robert Montgomery, you are under arrest for attempted murder," one of the officers said, approaching with handcuffs. Robert tried to resist, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, but the evidence was irrefutable. The toxicology reports, combined with his own confession in front of witnesses, sealed his fate. As Robert was led away by the police, Sophia felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief because Gabriel was finally safe, sadness because a family had been destroyed by greed and ambition. Edward was devastated, not only by his brother's betrayal, but by the realization of how naive and trusting he had been. "Sophia," Edward said, approaching her, "Dr. Armstrong told me how you figured everything out. You saved my son's life." Sophia didn't know what to say. She was still processing everything that had happened. "Mr. Montgomery, I just did what I thought was right. Gabriel didn't deserve what was happening to him." Edward looked at the brave young woman who had risked everything to save his son and felt a gratitude that words could not express. Here was a 17-year-old girl, the daughter of a cleaner, who had done what the best doctors and investigators could not: uncover the truth and save a life. In the following days, with the proper treatment to eliminate the toxins from his system, Gabriel began to show clear signs of recovery. His brain activity increased day by day, and the doctors were optimistic about his full recovery. Sophia had proven that sometimes true wisdom doesn't come from diplomas or professional experience, but from the courage to question what seems normal and the determination to do what is right, regardless of the personal risks. She had turned the lessons from an old notebook into a force capable of defeating evil and saving an innocent life. A week had passed since Robert's arrest, and St. Raphael's Hospital had a completely different atmosphere. The news of the poisoning had spread discreetly among the staff, but the hospital administration had requested absolute secrecy to protect the Montgomery family's privacy. Still, everyone knew that something extraordinary had happened, and that a very special young woman had been responsible for saving a life. Gabriel was showing impressive signs of recovery, with the proper treatment to eliminate the toxins from his system and no further interference from the poison. His body was responding surprisingly well. On Monday, he had moved his fingers for the first time in weeks. On Tuesday, his eyes opened for a few seconds, and on Wednesday, to everyone's joy and emotion, he had whispered his father's name. Edward practically never left his son's bedside. His brother's betrayal had been a devastating blow, but seeing Gabriel come back to life gave him the strength to overcome the pain. He had spent so many nights imagining he would lose his son that every small sign of improvement felt like a miracle. "Dad," Gabriel murmured on Thursday morning, his voice still weak but clear. What happened to me?" Edward held his son's hand, struggling to control his emotions. "You've been very sick, my son, but you're getting better now. Soon you'll be completely well." Gabriel tried to focus, his memories slowly returning. "I remember being at home, having tea with Uncle Robert. Then, nothing." Edward closed his eyes, feeling the pain of betrayal again. How could he explain to his son that his own uncle had tried to kill him? How could he make Gabriel understand that the person who seemed to care so much for him actually wanted him dead? "Gabriel, there are things we need to talk about when you're stronger. For now, the important thing is your recovery." Meanwhile, Sophia continued her routine at the hospital, but now she was seen in a new light by everyone who knew her story. The doctors greeted her with respect, the nurses treated her like a hero, and even the hospital administration had officially recognized her contribution to saving Gabriel's life. Dr. Armstrong had become a sort of mentor to Sophia. Impressed by her intelligence and medical intuition, he had spoken with Edward about the possibility of helping Sophia pursue a career in medicine. "Edward," the doctor said, "that young woman has an extraordinary natural talent. With the right education, she could become a brilliant doctor. It would be a tragedy to waste such potential." Edward had thought a lot about this. Sophia had saved his son's life, risking her own safety and that of her mother. She deserved much more than the limited opportunities her financial situation allowed. On Friday, Edward asked to speak with Sophia and Mary Miller. He had carefully prepared what he was going to say, knowing that this conversation would change their lives forever. "Sophia, Mary, you know what happened with Gabriel. Sophia, your courage and intelligence saved my son. There is no way to properly repay that, but I would like to try." Mary Miller was nervous, not knowing what to expect. Sophia, on the other hand, maintained the same serenity she had shown throughout the crisis. "Mr. Montgomery, I didn't do anything expecting a reward," Sophia said. "Gabriel needed help, and I knew how to help. It was my duty to do something." Edward smiled, admiring the young woman's maturity even more. "Sophia, you have a special gift. Dr. Armstrong told me you demonstrated a knowledge of toxicology that many trained doctors do not possess. I would like to offer you a full scholarship to study medicine at the best university in the country." Sophia's heart raced, but she tried to maintain her composure. She had always dreamed of studying medicine, inspired by her grandfather Jacob's stories and teachings, but she knew her family could never afford college. "Furthermore," Edward continued, "I would like to offer you, Mary, a new job. My company has a human resources department that needs someone as responsible and dedicated as you. The salary would be significantly better, and there would be health plans and other benefits." Mary Miller began to cry, too emotional to speak. After years of working hard to provide the best for her daughter, she finally saw the possibility of a better life for them both. "Mr. Montgomery," Mary said, her voice choked with emotion, "I don't know how to thank you. Sophia has always been a special girl, but I never imagined that she was capable of—" "Your daughter is extraordinary, Mary, and she deserves every opportunity we can offer her." Sophia looked at her mother, then at Edward, and finally spoke. "Mr. Montgomery, I accept your offer, but on one condition." Edward was curious. "What condition?" "When I graduate, I want to come back to work in hospitals like this one. I want to use what I learned to help other people who might be in situations like Gabriel's. I want to teach other doctors to look beyond the obvious, as my grandfather taught me." Edward was once again impressed by the young woman's wisdom and generosity. "Sophia, you can be sure that I will support whatever path you choose to follow." In the following days, the lives of Sophia and Mary Miller changed completely. Sophia began receiving private tutoring to prepare for her medical school entrance exams, while Mary started her new job at Edward's company. For the first time in their lives, they had financial stability and the prospect of a bright future. Gabriel continued to recover rapidly. The doctors were impressed with the speed of his improvement, and there was already talk of him being discharged from the hospital in a few weeks. Edward had decided not to tell him about Robert's betrayal immediately, preferring to wait until Gabriel was fully recovered, to deal with that painful revelation. But Gabriel was not naive. He had noticed that Robert no longer came to visit him, and when he asked about his uncle, Edward always changed the subject. Gradually, Gabriel began to suspect that something more serious had happened. "Dad," Gabriel said one afternoon, "where is Uncle Robert? Why doesn't he come to see me anymore?" Edward knew he couldn't postpone this conversation forever. He sat beside his son's bed and very gently told him the whole truth about what had happened. Gabriel listened in silence, his expression changing from confusion to shock, then to pain, and finally to a mixture of sadness and gratitude. "So a young woman who didn't even know me risked everything to save me, while my own uncle was trying to kill me?" Gabriel asked, trying to process the reality. "Yes, my son. Sophia is a very special person. She saw something no one else could see, and she had the courage to act when everyone else was blind." Gabriel was silent for a few minutes, absorbing everything. Then he asked, "Can I meet her? I would like to thank her personally." The next day, Edward brought Sophia to meet Gabriel. She was nervous, not knowing what to say to the young man she had saved. Gabriel, in turn, was anxious to meet the person who had given him a second chance at life. "Sophia," Gabriel said, extending his hand to her, "I don't know how to thank you for what you did for me." Sophia took his hand, feeling how strange it was to finally talk to someone she had only seen unconscious for so many weeks. "Gabriel, I'm happy to see you recovered. You deserve to have a long and happy life." The two talked for over an hour. Gabriel was impressed by Sophia's intelligence and maturity, while she was touched by the kindness and humility of the young man, who, despite being born into a wealthy family, showed no arrogance or superiority. "Sophia," Gabriel said, "when you graduate from medical school, I'd like you to consider coming to work with me. I plan to expand the family business to include hospitals and clinics that offer quality treatment to people of all social classes. Someone with your unique perspective would be invaluable to that project." Sophia smiled, thinking how proud her grandfather Jacob would be if he could see where his lessons had led. "Gabriel, it would be an honor to work on a project like that." As they talked, Edward observed the interaction between the two young people and felt a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. Gabriel was alive and recovering. Sophia would have the opportunity to develop her extraordinary talents, and perhaps in the future, the two of them could work together to make a difference in the lives of others. The story that had begun with an attempted murder was turning into a story of redemption, opportunity, and hope. Sophia had proven that one brave and determined person can change the course of events regardless of their origin or social position. But there was still a final chapter to be written. Sophia was about to embark on the journey that would lead her to become a doctor, and Gabriel was preparing to resume his life with a new perspective on what really matters. They had both learned valuable lessons about courage, family, and the importance of doing the right thing, and these lessons would shape the rest of their lives. 5 years had passed since that day that forever changed the lives of Sophia, Gabriel, and Edward. St. Raphael's Hospital remained the same luxurious environment as always, but now it housed a story of courage and transformation that had become a legend among staff and doctors. Sophia, now 22, was in her final year of medical school at Columbia University. She had distinguished herself as one of the top students in her class, specializing in toxicology and emergency medicine. Her professors often commented on her extraordinary intuition for complex diagnoses and her unique ability to notice details that other students missed. Throughout all these years, Sophia had kept her grandfather, Jacob's notebook, as her guide and inspiration. Often during her studies, she found confirmation for modern theories or insights that helped her understand complex cases in the old notes. Jacob's practical knowledge, acquired in wartime, remained relevant and valuable in contemporary medicine. Mary Miller had flourished in her new job at Edwards Company. Her dedication and honesty had led to several promotions, and she now supervised a human resources team. For the first time in her life, she felt financially secure and proud to have provided her daughter with the opportunities she had always dreamed of. Gabriel, now 27, had fully recovered from the poisoning with no permanent side effects. The near-death experience had profoundly changed his perspective on life. He had gradually taken on more responsibilities in the family business, but always with a focus on social projects and initiatives that benefited the community. Edward, in turn, had transformed the pain of his brother's betrayal into fuel for doing good. Inspired by Sophia's courage, he had created a foundation that offered scholarships to talented young people from low-income backgrounds, especially in the field of medicine. The Jacob Sanders Foundation, named in honor of Sophia's grandfather, had already benefited hundreds of students. Robert had been sentenced to 15 years in prison for attempted murder. For the first few years, he had tried to appeal the sentence, claiming he had suffered a temporary mental breakdown, but the evidence was irrefutable, and his confession had been recorded by several witnesses. Edward never visited his brother in prison again, and Gabriel had chosen not to maintain contact. Some wounds were too deep to heal. One spring morning, Sophia was doing her internship at St. Raphael's Hospital, now as a final-year medical student. It was a strange feeling to be there as a doctor in training, in the same place where she had spent so many afternoons as the cleaner's daughter. Many of the old staff members still greeted her warmly, remembering the brave girl who had saved Gabriel's life. Dr. Henry Armstrong, now her internship advisor, watched Sophia's development with pride. She had become exactly the brilliant doctor he had predicted years ago. "Sophia," he said during a break between appointments, "there's an interesting case I'd like you to evaluate. It's a 40-year-old patient who came in with unexplained neurological symptoms. Conventional tests have shown nothing conclusive." Sophia smiled, recognizing the pattern. During her years of study, she had encountered several similar cases where her powers of observation and knowledge of toxins had helped her identify poisonings that had gone unnoticed by other doctors. "I'll examine the patient, doctor. Have they collected a sample for toxicology analysis?" "Not yet. The doctors who initially saw him didn't suspect poisoning. It's always good to investigate. Often what seems neurological can have a toxic origin." Sophia went to examine the patient and, after a careful analysis of the symptoms and history, recommended specific tests to detect heavy metals. Her suspicion was confirmed. The man was being slowly poisoned by lead at his workplace. With the proper treatment, he made a full recovery. Cases like this happened frequently. Sophia had developed a reputation at the hospital as the student who could solve medical mysteries, especially those related to poisonings. Her colleagues joked that she had a sixth sense for poisons. That afternoon, Sophia received a call from Gabriel. He had finalized the plans for the first hospital in the network he intended to create, aimed at serving patients of all social classes with the highest quality of care. "Sophia, I'd like you to come see the blueprints. We're thinking of including a specialized toxicology center, just as you suggested 2 years ago." Sophia was moved. Since she had met Gabriel personally, the two had developed a solid friendship based on mutual respect and a shared vision of using medicine to make a difference in society. "Gabriel, that would be wonderful. When do we start construction?" "Next year, right after you graduate. I want you to be the head of the toxicology department." Sophia thought of her grandfather Jacob and how proud he would be to know that his teachings had come so far. From an old notebook with wartime jottings, a new generation of medical knowledge had been born that would save many lives. A few weeks later, During her graduation ceremony, Sophia was on stage receiving her diploma when she saw Edward, Gabriel, and her mother in the audience, applauding emotionally. Dr. Armstrong was by her side as the class patron and had told everyone present the extraordinary story of how a young student had saved a life even before graduating. "Today," Sophia said in her graduation speech, "I graduate not just as a doctor, but as a person who has learned that true medicine goes far beyond books and equipment. It requires the courage to question the obvious, the humility to learn from any source of knowledge, and the determination to always do the right thing." She held her diploma and continued, "I dedicate this achievement to my grandfather, Jacob Sanders, who taught me that wisdom can come from anywhere, and that one determined person can change the world. I also dedicate it to all the patients who will trust in me, promising that I will always use my knowledge to protect and save lives." The audience rose in a warm ovation. Sophia had become a symbol. That talent and determination can overcome any social or economic obstacle. 2 years later, the Gabriel Montgomery Hospital was inaugurated, with Sophia as the head of the toxicology department. It was a state-of-the-art hospital that served private and public health system patients with the same quality and dedication. Sophia had realized her dream of democratizing access to excellent medical care. During the inauguration ceremony, Gabriel gave an emotional speech. "This hospital exists because a brave young woman decided that every life has value, regardless of a person's origin or social condition. Sophia taught me that true wealth lies in the ability to do good and protect the defenseless." Sophia, now 24, had become one of the most respected toxicologists in the country. Her reputation had spread quickly, and doctors from all over the United States sent complex cases for her evaluation. She had saved dozens of lives, always remembering her grandfather Jacob's lessons about observing the details others ignored. One afternoon, while reviewing cases in her office at the new hospital, Sophia was visited by a young medical student who had heard her story. "Dr. Sophia," the young woman said, "I wanted to ask how you developed this skill for detecting poisonings. Is it something that can be learned?" Sophia smiled, remembering herself years ago, curious and determined. "Of course it can be learned. The secret is to never accept that something is inexplicable. There is always a cause, always an answer. We just need the courage to look in places where others don't." She picked up a copy of her grandfather Jacob's notebook, which she had had reproduced for study. "Start by studying real cases. Observe patterns. And remember, sometimes the simplest answer is the correct one, even when it seems impossible." That night at home, Sophia looked at the portrait of her grandfather Jacob on the wall. Next to it was her graduation photo and several news articles about her achievements in medicine. She had honored his legacy in a way she never imagined possible. "Thank you, Grandpa," she whispered, "for teaching me that knowledge is power, but that wisdom is knowing how to use that power to protect people." Sophia had become much more than a successful doctor. She was a symbol of hope for young people from humble backgrounds, an inspiration to her medical colleagues, and a guardian of human life. Her story proved that one brave person, armed only with knowledge and determination, can confront evil and win. Gabriel, now married and the father of a little girl, often brought his child to visit Aunt Sophia, as she had become known in the family. The girl grew up hearing stories about courage and justice, learning that heroes can come from anywhere, and that doing the right thing sometimes requires sacrifice. Edward, now a grandfather and president of one of the largest educational foundations in the country, looked at Sophia as the daughter he never had. She had brought light to his family in a time of darkness and continued to be a source of pride and inspiration. Mary Miller, now a director of human resources, never forgot where she came from. She often visited hospitals to offer words of encouragement to other cleaning staff, telling the story of how her daughter had changed their lives through study and courage. The story that had begun with an observant young woman sitting in the corridors of a hospital had transformed into a legend of overcoming adversity, courage, and social transformation. Sophia had proven that it doesn't matter where you are born or what your financial limitations are. With determination, knowledge, and the courage to do what is right, anyone can change not only their own life, but the lives of many others. And so, the girl who had saved a billionaire became a woman who dedicated her life to saving people from all backgrounds, transforming the knowledge inherited from a humble grandfather into a powerful force for good. Her story would continue to inspire future generations of doctors and young dreamers, proving that true heroism lies in using our talents to protect and serve others. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Sophia and Gabriel has deeply touched your hearts. Sophia taught us that courage is not about a person's size or the power they possess, but about the determination to do what is right when someone's life is at stake. If you were moved by this extraordinary journey, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments which moment stood out to you the most. Every day, we bring intense stories like this one, revealing the most courageous and generous side of the human soul, showing that heroes exist among us and that anyone can make a difference when they decide to act with love and courage. Until the next episode, continue to believe in the transformative power of human kindness.